Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the show. I am your host, as always, ProLib. My co-host Kitty is here with me. Good evening, Kitty.
Hey, everyone. How's it going?
It's
Yeah,
going.
that's the vibe.
It's going. That's the vibe. Yeah. So, welcome to the show, everybody. Tonight we are talking about the article that I wrote today about Curtis Yarvin. We're going to find out about Curtis Yarvin. Who even is this guy? Why would I even be writing about some random blogger? And we're going to review the very first blog post Curtis Yarvin ever wrote and why it's important to understand this blog post, because it's just some guy wrote some blog post in 2007 and we're going to talk about it tonight, almost 20 years later. Isn't that interesting? Doesn't that seem like a very interesting show? Not only that, Kitty, tonight's episode is the first episode of a 3-part series about Curtis Yarvin.
Bring it on.
Bring it on. Bring it on. Who is this guy? Hey, he doesn't even have a YouTube channel. Kitty, when he started his blog, he didn't even use his real name. He used a pseudonym. How is this important? How is this guy important at all?
I have no idea.
Well, we're going to talk all about it. You're going to learn all about the man Curtis Yarvin is. For those of you who do know who Curtis Yarvin is, I want to just kind of warn you, I guess. We're not going to be talking about modern Curtis Yarvin yet. That's going to be in episode 2 and 3. So his stuff about turning undesirables into biodiesel, I know everybody wants to talk about that.
Oh, wow.
That's not going to be tonight. Okay? We're going to get there.
We're in for a treat, apparently.
It's coming. We could do 20 episodes on Curtis Yarvin, all of which could be 8 hours long, and all of it would be fascinating. But we're going to try to keep this somewhat pared down. Okay? So we're going to hit on some big topics, and we're going to start at the very beginning tonight. The very beginning, which is the Formalist Manifesto. Kitty?
I'm not like this, am I?
I have a question for you. How do you feel about libertarianism?
So, collectively, libertarianism tends to be much more right-leaning. I mean, there are, like, libertarian socialists, like the Kyle Kalinskys of the world, where it's, if you're going 4-quadrant,
Sure.
Authoritarian, libertarian, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So, but as a collective whole, if somebody uses libertarian as their political identifier, to me, it just means that they're conservative. They just don't have the balls to admit it.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. That's a really great way to say it. There is a theory. I did a show years ago about horseshoe theory, okay? Horseshoe theory is this theory that politics is not a left to right spectrum, but it's a horseshoe wherein extremists from the left and extremists from the right horseshoe back together and basically become the same thing. That is absolute unmitigated bullshit. The far left and the far right are very, very different. Far left and far right, I hate to break it to you, because some people get this wrong, people think that equates to anarchy on the far left. The far left is anarchy. The far left is not anarchy. The far left, the far most extremist left, would be syndicalism. It would be a breakdown of society into very, very small, structured societies that would not use money in any way. It would all be barter system. Huh?
Communes.
Communes, co-ops. That is the far left. It is not anarchy. Anarchy is the absence of political structure. Anarchy is Mad Max. It is whomever can take does take. By the way, this is all foreshadowing. Okay, I'm not just talking about this right now to talk about this. This is foreshadowing. Just want to throw that out there. Anarchy is the breakdown, the absence of political structure. That is anarchy. It is not fit anywhere on the political spectrum. Far right, the most right that you can get would be extreme, like feudalist, despotism. One person is in charge, sets all the rules, sets all the laws, and makes all of the decisions, and is the authority on everything, on what the law even is. Not just what the laws are, but what the law itself is, how it's declared, how punishments are meted out,
like
yada, yada, yada.
Like a monarchy, or, an absolute monarchy.
Really, theocracy is probably, and there's a lot of back and forth on this in political circles. My feeling has always been that theocracy is as far right as it can be. One person declaring that they are empowered due to some sort of divine...
The God Emperor of Warhammer 40K.
Yes, but even more extreme, because even the God Emperor has like governors and like...
This is fair.
Right. So would be absolute theocracy. There is one person who is deemed the head of governmental structure and all law and everything that's given to them by a divine source. That's my opinion. Other people feel that it would be more secular than theocratic.
Like a Yahtzee Pope.
Right. Yahtzee Pope. Sure. And honestly, people have told me things like I've had this debate before and people have convinced me that I'm wrong. So I don't have like a strong conviction about whether or not it is theocracy. It's just today it kind of feels like theocracy. Okay. So now that we've explained all of that and we've gotten politics 101 out of the way tonight, let's talk about why Curtis Yarvin is even important. Why would we even bother doing a show about some guy named Curtis Yarvin? Well, that's because Curtis Yarvin is deemed a modern political guru by Peter Thiel. And for those of you who don't know, I don't know how you don't know this, but maybe you don't know this, Peter Thiel is the person who empowered J.D. Vance, brought J.D. Vance to prominence. Peter Thiel is very good friends, very close with Elon Musk.
So basically just like a spiritual successor to like Ayn Rand?
I would say that Yarvin himself would say spiritual successor to Murray Rothbard. We're going to talk about that tonight. Murray Rothbard was a famous libertarianist in the mid 20th century, wrote a bunch of books that you don't need to read, just go. They're all bullshit. Anyway, I would say that Yarvin himself would say Ayn Rand to Murray Rothbard to Curtis Yarvin and some others too that I don't want to spoil it yet. So we're gonna get there because there's some stuff I didn't put in the blog intentionally because I want to talk about it tonight. I wanted to have some more content for the channel and for the Substack for that matter. So that's why Curtis Yarvin is important, because Curtis Yarvin's philosophy, his ideology, that's the word that he used in the Formalist Manifesto, is influencing everything that's happening in modern politics today. Literally, like the deconstruction of the federal government. That's Curtis Yarvin's idea from 2007.
Lovely.
From this blog post he wrote 20 years ago under a pseudonym. So that's why we're talking about him, and that's why we're going to go over the Formalist Manifesto tonight. We have talked recently about techno-fatalism, and I want to talk about that real quick in case you didn't see that show or read those articles. Techno-fatalism is the idea that technology will inevitably overwrite democracy. That AI will be so good and so smart that it will make all the decisions about what you need, what's best for you, and that will be more efficient than the democratic structure. And it will be free of corruption because all the decisions are being made by AI. AI is deciding where all the money goes, not a Congress. Nobody's voting on it. AI is deciding who needs resources. And because it's so smart, it has reached the singularity. It is smarter than humanity, and it decides what's best for people. So you don't need any system of government. You just need AI. You just need really smart AI that can take over and make all the decisions. By the way, it'll also be smart enough for all the tech bros to upload their consciousness into robots and be immortal. But let's just forget about that for a second. But you can just have AI that just makes all the decisions for you. And the tech bros being immortal robots, that's just a benefit.
You want Skynet? That is how you get Skynet.
It's just a side benefit. It's just a side benefit. Yarvin, Curtis Yarvin, began blogging in 2007 under the pseudonym Mencius Moldbug. The title of his blog, I don't know what it means, okay? I've been working on this all day. What the fuck does Mencius Moldbug mean? I don't know. That's just the name. I don't know. I don't know if he was playing D&D and like you have the D&D like random name generators, and it makes up a name for your D&D character, and it came up with Mencius Moldbug. That's the only thing that I can think of that makes any fucking lick of sense on Mencius Moldbug.
I don't know.
The title of his blog was Unqualified Reservations. That was his blog website was Unqualified Reservations, and the first post was entitled A Formalist Manifesto. Which sounds like the title of something a Batman villain would write. The manifesto itself feels very stream of consciousness. I feel like when Yarvin sat down to write this, I don't think he sat down with like an outline. Like, if you've ever read, I've never read the whole thing, but if you ever read the Unabomber's manifesto, he sat down with a plan. Like when he sat down to write that, when Kaczynski sat down to write that, he sat down to write it to convince people he was right. And Yarvin's manifesto feels more like he had all of these things kind of bubbling up in him, and he just needed to get them out. And this is what came out at the other end. He even starts the blog by saying, I was working in my garage and was like, I just want to start writing. I mean, it's very there wasn't a plan behind it. It was just kind of what he was brewing in the back of his head. But he begins with this explanation, and I do apologize. This is a little bit long, but this sets the stage for tonight. So I'm going to read this. It's about 2 paragraphs, but I'm going to read this whole thing. This is our exposition. You know, when you watch a movie and you got some exposition in the beginning, it's a little bit boring, but you just got to get through it so you understand.
A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Right.
So we gotta read our title crawl here real quick. Okay. So just bear with me, guys. He starts with his grievances about conservatism and progressivism and how the whole world is steeped in progressivism, and it's brought us nothing but violence and decay. And conservatism isn't really even conservatism. It's like light libertarianism, and that doesn't work either. And the biggest problem is that most people consider themselves moderates or centrists. They don't consider themselves progressives or conservatives at all. They consider themselves something else. And Yarvin is trying to define what the something else is. Okay? So, he says, moderation is not an ideology. It is not an opinion. It's not a thought. It's an absence of thought. If you believe the status quo of 2007 is basically righteous, then you should believe the same thing if a time machine transported you to Vienna in 1907. But if you went around Vienna in 1907 saying that there should be a European Union, that Africans and Arabs should rule their own countries and even colonize Europe. By the way, there's a lot of racist dog whistles throughout this. So just be prepared for all the racist dog whistles. That was one. There's going to be lots more. That any form of government except parliamentary democracy is evil. That paper money is good for business. That all doctors should work for the state, etc., etc. Well, you could probably find people who agreed with you. They wouldn't call themselves moderates, and nor would anyone else. No, if you were a moderate in Vienna in 1907, you thought Franz Josef I was the greatest thing since sliced bread. So which is it? Habsburgs or Eurocrats? Pretty hard to split the difference on that one. In other words, the problem with moderation is that the center is not fixed. It moves. And since it moves, and people being people, people will try to move it. This creates an incentive for violence, something we formalists try to avoid. So Yarvin's problem with centrist, with moderates, excuse me, is a problem of inconsistency. And what he's saying is anyone can influence the center. And so if we don't define what the center is and what parameters are guardrails around the center, people can move the center and anyone can call themselves a centrist at any time, and it can be true. Because the center is too malleable. And we need some way to define the center moving forward. And for him, that's formalism.
I mean, I will say, like, when you're talking about just human thought in general and, like, political, like, I'll concede that he does have a little bit of a point in that,
Sure.
as time changes and societal values change, what
Sure.
is considered moderate or the center will change, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Well, it is for Yarvin. And I think the reason that it's bad for him is because Yarvin doesn't realize it yet. You have to understand that Yarvin evolved over time. But what Yarvin is calling for is authoritarianism. And that becomes more clear. I mean, obviously there were some threads of it there. It becomes more clear throughout the manifesto. But for him, we keep coming back to this problem of violence. People are violent. People harm each other. People may harm each other to get their goods. They may harm each other as punishment for crimes. And violence is what needs to be eliminated. And people are violent because they don't have a centralized ideology to rally themselves around. That's the central point of Yarvin's manifesto, is that if people could just have something defined to believe in that wasn't progressivism and wasn't conservatism, that aligned with their natural their natural being, they would stop being violent towards one another. I'm not saying he's right. I'm saying that's what he says. Okay. He goes on to start praising libertarianism. And that's why I wanted to bring that up earlier. Yarvin really likes libertarianism. He says, I love libertarians to death. I would love to live in a libertarian society. And Kitty, unfortunately, he takes a swipe at your favorite president. He says, and I'm quoting, FDR's administration as the Roosevelt dictatorship. Now, for those who aren't aware, FDR served 4 terms, was elected to 4 consecutive terms, pissed off the Republicans so much they passed a whole ass amendment so that no one else could do it. And they've really been mad about it since. They've been mad that people liked FDR so much that they elected him 4 freaking times in a row. 16 years he served as president. And Yarvin carries that on. He says it was a dictatorship. Kitty, just real quick, could you expand upon FDR's the Roosevelt dictatorship?
Oh, absolutely. So he died in his 4th term. He didn't actually serve the full one, but
I'm sorry, he was elected to 16 years, right? But he didn't.
yes,
He didn't finish. Right.
but just minor correction.
Yes.
So he not only did very popular things like Medicare, Social Security. He basically got us out of the Great Depression. And if it wasn't for the fact that he instituted social democratic policies, we would not exist as a country today.
Probably
We
not.
were literally on the breaking point because of the Great Depression, and he got us out of it. He was incredibly popular, and he knew very well that you needed to fight authoritarianism. You needed to make sure you took care of kitchen table issues, because people will vote in favor of fascists and giving up their rights if they're worried about putting bread on the table.
And I think it's important to understand that it wasn't just that they were thinking about seceding from the Union. They were individual states and conglomerates of states were looking to literally join other countries. Literally, we will be subservient to, I think it was like Italy and France or so. I don't remember which
Probably
ones.
France. France is pretty
I
pretty
think
intertwined with American history.
right. But I mean, they were literally it's not necessarily like we're seceding and, it wasn't like Civil War, we're going to go to war. It was like economically, we're going to join these other economies that are
totally
more
fucked.
successful.
So let's go tie ourselves and become colonies again.
Right,
basically.
right. And FDR fixed it with the New Deal, that Yarvin is now saying was the Roosevelt dictatorship.
When Roosevelt's policies prevented the rise of fascism in the United States.
It did. And then he goes on to make a fun point. He goes on to acknowledge that libertarianism has never been implemented in practice and has never created any kind of successful government. I actually asked you just last week, hey, Kitty, what is a libertarianist government? How does it operate?
Might makes right.
Well, he goes into so I don't want to spoil too much because we're going to get to that because he gets to that. But he addresses it. So he goes on to say this. Formalism, as we'll see, is an ideology designed by geeks for other geeks. Now, if you are a Silicon Valley tech bro, that probably gets your loins tingling. A government designed by geeks for other geeks. He doesn't say it's designed by the people. He doesn't say it's for the people. He says it's by geeks for other geeks. Yarvin was a programmer. He was a computer programmer at the time.
That tracks.
It's not a kit. It doesn't come with batteries. You can't just pop it in. At best, it's a rough starting point to help you build your own DIY ideology. If you're not comfortable working with a table saw, an oscilloscope, and an autoclave, formalism is not for you. I have no idea what the fuck I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means.
But,
I've worked with all of those things, but it's definitely not for me.
and there's not really major connection between all of those things either.
Listen.
We're trying to logic this.
I have been to city council meetings and stuff. Not once would a table saw, an oscilloscope, or an autoclave have been useful at one of those meetings. Not even once. Okay? Okay, maybe a couple of times, but not in ways that would keep you from getting arrested.
Right.
I mean, I don't know that you can be like, hey, we need more money to build schools. You're like, well, break out the oscilloscope.
Yeah, or
I don't
just behead the council.
I don't know. I don't really understand. He goes on to say the basic idea of formalism. Okay, so here's the central idea. The basic idea of formalism is just that the main problem in human affairs is violence. The goal is to design a way for humans to interact on a planet of remarkably limited size without violence.
No. Just no.
Okay, we're going to take a small detour here. Okay? We're going to talk about some American history. We're really talking about Western history, but we're going to through our American lens. The Colonial Congress had a big problem in that they really didn't want to be ruled by somebody that it took 3 months to communicate with. They didn't want those people making their rules for them. And they didn't have the resources to support themselves. They really, 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 really needed British resources to survive the winter. One of the big problems that George Washington had during the Revolutionary Wars, he didn't have any way to feed his troops. There are reams of journals and letters from the troops in the army talking about how there's nothing to eat. There was no infrastructure within the colonies to feed the army. Washington would write letter after letter after letter to Congress begging that, like, please send me anything. Send me some grain. Send me some oats. Like, send me any, like, just go around and knock on doors and write. He would write to newspapers throughout the colonies. He would write these editorials and be like, if you're a farmer in the colonies, please send us a bag of oats. I've got to feed these men, and I have nothing to feed them with. The men were boiling their own shoes in the winter of 1776. They were boiling their shoes. There's one troop that talks about how the only thing that he had to eat that day was some bark he gnawed off of a tree.
Like, that's just...
Okay? But they also knew that they could not abide a king any longer, right? So the colonies are like, we're going to get the smartest man in the room to write a Declaration of Independence that is crafted so well that we'll be independent from the king, but the king won't be mad at us. Benjamin Franklin, you do it. And Ben Franklin's like, oh, fuck no. No. I'm not. No, I'm in my 70s and I've done plenty. Choose this lawyer from Virginia. And they're like, I'm sorry, who?
Also, he had he kind of had a reputation.
That too. Sure, there were a lot of different reasons. I'm brevity for the soul, brevity for the sake of wit. So Jefferson is tasked with doing this. And guys, if you haven't been here before, I know all of the horrible, terrible things about Jefferson. We've talked about them ad nauseum on this channel. Me talking about Jefferson does not mean that I don't acknowledge all those things. We got to get through this thing. And so I'm truncating all of that. Yes, he was a horrible, terrible person. But he also wrote the Declaration of Independence. So what are you going to do?
And everybody was pretty much terrible people back then.
Right. So Jefferson sits down to write a document and says, how in the hell do I do this? And Jefferson was very, very, very influenced by the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment was Europe had been under theocratic rule from popes and kings and emperors and whatever for 2,000 years at this point. Not 2,000, 1,400 years at this point. And they were sick of it. And it resulted in one of the big things was Crowley, not Crowley, oh my God, completely different person. Cromwell's revolution that resulted in tens of thousands of deaths because Cromwell convinced a bunch of people that theocratic rule was the only right rule. And once Cromwell was done away with, the European Enlightenment said, we're not doing this again. We're just not doing this again. But you still had people like the Puritans that were like, well, we really kind of want that. And they were like, just get on a boat and sail somewhere, okay? Just get on a boat and sail. We're done with you. And Jefferson was very pro-Enlightenment. Even crafted his own Bible, the Jefferson Bible, because Jefferson was a deist. So Jefferson didn't believe in a literal resurrection. He didn't believe in a literal virgin birth. So he took a lot of those things out of Jefferson's Bible. Jefferson's Bible is much more a philosophical document than a document about miracles and sacraments. And so this man sat down and crafted the Declaration of Independence in a way that would say, hey, there are times when humans say, we don't need no damn king, and we aren't listening to a king anymore. We're going to create our own thing. We're going to create our own country and our own government, and maybe it won't work too well.
Well, I was about to quote Bender, but no, we're on YouTube.
Yeah. And maybe it won't work that well. Maybe it won't be perfect, but we're going to strive to make it perfect. And that's where its perfection comes from. Not in its application of perfection, but in the continual fight to make it perfect. The imperfections of self-governance are what make it beautiful. Not the end result all the time. Hopefully the end result is more commonly towards perfect than not. But he wrote it knowing that.
More self-correcting, you know.
That was the idea, was that it would be a self-correcting government of people that allowed people to rise up to the highest powers in the land and direct the government if the ideas that they had were popular enough with the populace in order to accept that person as their ruler, right? At the time, they didn't have any idea of legislative and judicial and executive. These are just the ideas that are coming out of the Enlightenment, right? It's just like a volcano exploding. And so Jefferson just sits down to craft this document, just with all these ideas in his head. And what Yarvin is saying, and Thiel and Musk and Vance and Ramaswamy and all the people that agree with him, is that was a mistake. That you, being empowered by documents like the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, the Civil Rights Act, all the different things, that women's suffrage, that was a mistake. We never should have done that. And so because the problem is, I was skipping it. I don't want to skip ahead yet. We're going to go more into this. Because the problem is that when you self-govern yourself, sometimes you're violent. And that must be eliminated. At all costs, not just your ability, but your desire for violence must be eliminated from you. And the way to do that is to give you the perfect government that makes it so that you don't even ever want to be violent. It's not that violence is outlawed. It would be, but your desire to be violent is eliminated because the government is so perfect that you'll never feel like it.
But that's not how human nature works. I mean, like even in things like, you know, Brave New World and so on, like selective breeding, drugs, like different things to help control the populace, like thought, you know, policing and thought control. Like, you can't get rid of violence from people. Like, people are animals, and animals will sometimes get violent. Every single person has it in them to be violent given the right stimuli.
So Yarvin actually addresses it backwards. And it's crafty, and I hate giving him any compliments, but it's crafty how he addresses it. He doesn't address it through violence. He addresses it through pacifism. It's very sneaky the way that he does this. Yarvin then addresses pacifism, something I'm a big fan of as a Taoist. I'm not a pacifist necessarily, but Taoists believe that all violence is abhorrent and it should be avoided at all costs, only when absolutely necessary to like defend your own life or the life of a loved one. Like that's the only time a Taoist would ever say violence is like okay, but it's still always immoral. To me, to my philosophy. And so it should always be avoided. If everyone is a pacifist except one person, Yarvin says, then that one person will use violence to rule over all of the pacifists. So pacifism should be disregarded because someone out there is going to be violent, and there goes your pacifist utopia.
Technically not wrong, but...
Technically not wrong. A lot of this is technically not wrong.
Like, technically correct, but...
And then he attaches them as the immoral failings of a too progressive society. He says the reason that we resort to violence too often is because of all the progressivism.
Right. So, when capitalism totally pillages like towns by going in and like a Walmart puts all the small businesses out, and then everybody grows up in poverty and their schools are underfunded because it's property taxes and the property value is shit. So they're not getting funded. So they're stuck in a constant cycle of poverty. And the number one predicator to crime, especially violent crime, tends to be poverty. So by not addressing those things, you end up with more people in poverty that leads to higher crime rates.
Right. Well, and what Yarvin then does, because that seems like the natural thing that you would go to next, but that's not where he goes next. Instead, what he does is he starts questioning the concept of law. Not the concept of what's legal and illegal, but the concept of law itself.
Oh, God.
Okay?
This is going to give me a headache.
I'm just going to read here. This isn't that long, but here he just starts asking all of these questions. And at first, I thought he was being like intentionally ignorant. But I don't know. That's why I want to ask all of these. I want your opinion. Here's what he says. Where do all these rules come from? He's talking about law. He's talking about the laws, like punishing someone for stealing is how we got here. Okay. And these are the questions he asked. Where do all these rules come from? Who makes them unbreakable? Who gets to be the oracle? Why is the wallet yours rather than mine? What happens if we disagree on this? If there's one rule for every wallet, how can everyone remember them all? And suppose it's not you, but me who's got the Glock. He keeps bringing up Glocks because that would be a racist dog whistle in the late 2000s. That was a racist dog whistle in the late 2000s. I don't know what to tell you. What we have is actually not rules at all, but agreements.
Again, technically correct. Societal contract.
There are agreements. Well, that's where I thought he was going too. But watch where this develops. There are agreements made with other specific individuals. I agree to paint your house. You agree to pay me. And there are agreements like I won't kill anyone on the street. But are these agreements really different?
Yes.
I don't think so. I think the second kind of agreement is just your agreement with whoever owns the street. In other words, he's saying that those laws are only laws because the people in charge decided that they were laws. There is no societal contract. There is no morality. You're simply following the rules because the people in charge told you to. And because they'll hurt you if you don't. And that's the only reason why we follow laws. That is the crux of formalism, is that laws don't exist. And the only law that exists is that whoever is in charge of the place that you're in decided that certain rules were in place and you have to follow them because they own that land. It's literal libertarianism. It's literally what we were talking about earlier. What did you say libertarianism was?
Essentially conservatism without the balls to admit it.
But whoever owns
But might makes right.
might make right. Whoever owns stuff gets to decide what the laws are. So if I'm the landlord of your house, I decide what the rules are in your house. But somebody else could own the plot of land that your house sits on, and their rules could overrule my rules. And somebody else could own the county, and then somebody else could own the state. See what I'm saying? So you've got all these different rules, different levels of authoritarianism. That's libertarianism. Maya, you should wait for episodes 2 and 3. Because you're skipping ahead. Remember, all of this is from the first thing he ever publicly wrote.
Under a pseudonym that sounds like a D&D, name generator.
So
made it.
We aren't at undesirables into biodiesel yet, Maya. We're not there yet, okay? Stop skipping ahead. We're going to get there. But we're not getting there tonight. We are not getting there tonight. This is, Spackle, exactly. This is my road, and I know it's the only way in and out. So $50, please. Sure.
Yeah?
Sure. He gets into some stuff about, I kind of did a digression here about Elon and judges. Read the article. It's in the description. If you haven't read it yet, go read it later. And I have the link to his thing, too. You can go read his thing. You don't need to. I did a full breakdown of it. You don't need to.
Yeah, don't give it traffic.
You really don't. You really don't. He then gets into equality, okay? Because for Yarvin, the concept of equality is the concept of progressivism, which is what creates violence. And since we want to eliminate violence, that whole equality thing, man, that's just causing so much violence.
Yeah, so like egalitarianism is totally going to cause violence when everybody's needs are met, and people don't have to scrape by to barely survive. That's going to cause more violence. Totally.
Here's how he addresses it. Kitty, I'm just going to ask you this question. Kitty, if I get an apple and you get an orange, are we equal?
I mean, we both got fruit.
Listen, I didn't write the damn thing. That's his question. It's not my question. That's what he asked. And he goes on to say, the very next sentence is, one could debate the subject with Glocks, perhaps.
Oh, my God.
Because, what did I just say? The Glocks thing is a racist dog whistle. And he's talking about equality. What he's saying is that black people are naturally violent.
Yes.
That is what he's saying. And so you can't empower black people because they'll get real violent with you.
Instead of maybe, fixing the societal issues that lead to people
fixing the what is this? What is this? Some kind of Roosevelt dictatorship?
Right? Like, let's bring back the Roosevelt dictatorship, man. Like, fuck.
All right. Then he goes on to say, even if everyone starts with equal everything, everyone, the Glocks people, right, Curtis? Even if everyone starts with equal everything, people being different, having different needs and skills and so on, like skin color. Okay, he didn't say that part. He didn't say, I inserted that. The concept of ownership implying that if you own something and you can give it to someone else, all is not likely to stay equal. In fact, it's basically impossible to combine a system in which agreements stay agreed with one in which equality stays equal. And that's because, he doesn't say this part, that's because if you make everyone equal, you got to make all the black people equal and they won't follow the law. And who's going to make them follow the law? The black judges? Nah, they'll just let them off.
The Glock people.
The Glock people. The unabashed racism that runs through this entire manifesto was almost astonishing to me.
And we're not even to the worst of the stuff, which won't be until the next 2 episodes.
Oh, we're not to the good stuff. We are. This is
This is the light and fluffy part of it.
He starts talking about ownership, and I want to get into this a little bit. He says, "Let's figure out exactly who has what now, and give them a fancy little certificate. Let's not get into who should have what, because, like it or not, this is simply a recipe for more violence." What he's talking about are things like Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare, the things that the government provides to people to make sure that they're okay. Those things create violence, according to Yarvin.
He's concerned about the Glock people being on those things, when if you actually look at the statistics, white people make up the majority of people that are getting federal assistance benefits.
He then takes a bit of a swerve into sovereign citizen territory.
Oh, no.
No. That's where I thought it was going to. I thought he was going to be, but he's anti-sovereign citizen, which at the time was growing a lot in popularity. The late 2000s was getting very, very popular with certain people. Mm-hmm. He says formalism has no such hangups. Modern Americans are, quote, corporate serfs because the U.S. is, quote, nothing but a corporation. And then makes an absolutely astonishing statement. Maybe not that astonishing, but astonishing. Quote, "I have no idea what the purpose of the U.S. is." The purpose of governments is to serve and protect the people that form those governments. That's why we have governments. We have governments to make sure that planes don't crash out of the sky, and that roads are paved, and that eggs aren't too expensive, and that eggs don't poison you when you eat them, and that
other countries don't decide, I like the way that looks, I think I'm going to go take it now.
Right, and that the natural resources that are, and I hate all of this, but this is why governments exist. The natural resources that are here in the United States, Russia can't just come in and take all of them and then go use it to help their own people instead of our people. And again,
no, but then you just have, local governments selling water rights to Saudi Arabia,
Sure, but I'm just talking about from a philosophical sense, that's why governments exist. Now, do they work all the time in practice? No, because what we talked about earlier, what Jefferson even acknowledged, is that government is not perfect.
Because it's run by people, and people are imperfect. It's run by
people, and people are greedy, and they do bad things. And that's why we have laws, is to make sure that when they do bad things, first of all, we have laws so that we can catch them doing the bad things. And secondly, we punish them. So that when they do the bad things, they're supposedly deterred from ever doing them again. That's a whole other thing that we'll talk about some other time, that whole philosophy. Right, it's very high level.
Where things get bad one way or another, that it will just kind of even out.
Sure. Obviously, Yarvin says, the U.S. exists. Obviously, it does stuff. But the way in which it decides what stuff is going to do is so opaque that as far as anyone outside the Beltway is concerned, it might as well be consulting ox entrails.
What?
Yarvin just admits that he has no idea how the government works. He just has he doesn't know. And that it's impossible to understand.
Like, anyone who even took one poli-sci class should be able...
So, real quick, Congress passes laws. The president is responsible for faithfully executing those laws, and the judiciary is responsible for making sure that those laws fit within the framework of the Constitution. That's how the fucking government works. There you go. I just explained the whole... That's civics. That's how your government works. Now you have local governments and state governments that work similarly in different aspects, and states can't overrule the federal government. There's a whole Supreme Court case about it a very long time ago. But as long as the state laws are fitting within the federal laws, they're fine. And as long as the local laws are fitting within the state and federal laws, it's fine.
It's like you could have federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, and then the state can be like, you know what, we want to have a $25 an hour minimum wage.
Sure.
Because it is at least the minimum that the federal government requires, then they're free to.
But the state can't
law.
say that the federal minimum wage is $5.
Exactly. It has to be at least that bare minimum, but it could go above it, which a lot of states have.
There you go. There you go, Curtis. Now you understand how your government works. 20 years too late, I guess. But there you go, bud. Congratulations. I guess we're done. We're done here.
Not.
So then he goes into talking about the success of independent city-states and names specifically Singapore, Hong Kong, and Dubai. Again, in 2007, Hong Kong was a successful independent city-state. Again, whole other pot. You go Google that. We're not getting to that right now.
Yeah, that's a whole other episode.
Whole other episode on Hong Kong. We can do that at some point. But it also completely misunderstands how the establishment of Western democratic soft power throughout the world made Singapore, Hong Kong, and Dubai possible.
Yeah.
And Taiwan, for that matter. Taiwan's not a city-state, it's an independent country, but those kinds of small, independent governmental structures are possible because of the expansion of soft democratic power, much of it pushed by the United States and our allies, our European NATO allies, sure. But he either disregards it because it's inconvenient or just isn't aware of it. And I'm honestly not sure. Later on in our other episodes, when we get into later Yarvin, it's obvious that it's intentional disregard.
Yeah, at this point, though, like, I'm leaning more towards at least 20 years ago, he had no fucking clue.
I think he just had no fucking idea. I think he just literally did not know how things work.
Like, he apparently never watched the freaking cartoons with the little bill on Capitol
Schoolhouse
Hill.
Rock, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Couldn't think
Yes,
of a name.
Yarvin, you should have paid attention that day when they wheeled in the television.
Right? The laser
So then he gets into... He kind of addresses this. He says, quote, formalists, that he's a formalist, attribute the success of Europe, Japan, and the US after World War II, not to democracy, but to its absence. While retaining the symbolic structures of democracy, much as the Roman Principate retained in the Senate, he brings up the Roman Empire, of fucking course.
Of course he did.
The post-war Western system has assigned almost all actual decision-making power to its civil servants and judges, who are apolitical and nonpartisan, i.e., non-democratic.
That's not what that means.
Okay. So, this is why I'm saying I think at this point he wasn't aware. And for anyone else who isn't, real quick, democracy is like an umbrella term. And there's a lot of things that fall under a democratic structure, specifically a parliamentary structure, a constitutional republic structure like we have, is a form of democracy. Just like a Cybertruck is a form of a garbage dumpster. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sorry. I apologize.
I was in Daytona over the weekend, and there was a Cybertruck that had a license plate that said Skynet that I saw by the racetrack.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
What Yarvin is saying, he's tying back to what he was talking about earlier that we kind of skipped over, and that's why I skipped over because I wanted to get to this part, is that judges, that the concept of judicial review, which is under attack everywhere right now, has always been under attack by conservatives, but they're really attacking it right now, is anti-democratic. That judicial review doesn't belong in a democratic system. Now, this was the argument originally made in 1803, that's in some of the Federalist Papers and stuff, that judicial review did not belong in Western society. So this isn't a new argument. They're treating it like it is, but judicial review was literally argued against in 1803. Thomas Jefferson didn't fucking like it. He was president at the time, and what judicial review decided was that the Supreme Court could be like, oh, no, you are not. You are not doing that. Okay? So Jefferson himself, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, again, I was doing a little bit of foreshadowing for you at the beginning of this episode, didn't like judicial review either, because it meant some judge could just overrule him and say, no. What? I'm the president. I'm in charge around here. And some activist judge, no, he wouldn't have used those terms. Some activist judge can just overrule me, Thomas Jefferson?
You're not foreshadowing anymore, hun. You're for broadcasting.
We are at the final paragraph of Curtis Yarvin's Formalist Manifesto.
I'm scared.
I'm going to read it all to you.
Oh, no.
Because it sets the stage for episodes 2 and 3.
God damn it.
So here we go. It's not that long. In other words, democracy appears to work because it is not, in fact, democracy, but a mediocre implementation of formalism.
What?
This relationship between symbolism and reality has received an educational, if depressing, test in the form of Iraq, where there is no law at all. I guess there's no law at all in Iraq. Iraq, if you're Iraqi, apparently you've never had laws. Ever. I guess. I don't know. I don't know. But which we have endowed with the purest and most elegant form of democracy, proportional representation. It's not proportional representation, dipshit. It's fucking constitutional republic. Anyway. And ministers who actually seem to run their ministries. While history does no controlled experiments, surely the comparison of Iraq to Dubai makes a fine case for formalism over democracy. Dubai is better than Iraq because it's got fewer controls. I'm sorry, I didn't almost say brown people. You will notice that conservatives really love Dubai, even though it's run by people with far too much pigmentation in their skin, because Dubai is a celebration of excess. And that's what Dubai, I'm not saying anything bad about Dubai. That's Dubai, like that's their whole thing is excess. Like that's Dubai. They want to take Vegas to the extreme. Like that's the whole theory of Dubai. I'd love to go there sometime. Like I'm totally in favor.
It's for wealthy people to basically just go and enjoy.
Sure, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's why conservatives love Dubai and shit on Iraq, which apparently has had no law, even though it's literally the home of Sumeria, which was the first governmental structure that all Western governments ended up being based on. Apparently Iraq just had no laws before we showed up with tanks one day. Dubai is not sustainable. Right. Spackle, I'm not saying it's sustainable in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying I'd love to visit because there's some really fucking cool shit in Dubai.
I mean, yeah, like considering you're in the middle of the desert and you can go skiing, like that
right.
Does sound pretty wild.
It's absolute insanity. It's absolute insanity.
Yes, they are also fans of slavery. So
I have no evidence that he had a stroke before or during the writing of this manifesto, even though it seems as though he may have.
It's making all of us feel like we're having a stroke.
Here's the other thing to remember. Okay, we read some boring stuff. I talked too much. I interrupted too much. Did all the things I'm not supposed to do. All the people that are in charge of your life right now think this is brilliant. They think everything in that document is the smartest thing anyone has ever said. All Yarvin did was reinvent communism. That's all this is. Whoever is in charge rules everything. And everybody, we don't have money. we're all comrades. We're all friends, and whoever's in charge makes all the rules. It's just communism. That's all this is. Yarvin reinvented communism again. And Vance and Musk and Thiel, this guy's brilliant. This guy's fucking brilliant.
Yeah,
how has no one ever thought of this
like
before?
Karl Marx, like those.
No, not even Marx. This is Leninism.
Fair.
Because Marxism was at least egalitarian.
Yes.
Leninism is just whoever's in charge fucking decides.
What I'm saying is if you were to quote Marx or Lenin, the same people that are
sure some parts of Marx,
this is the greatest thing ever would be like grabbing the pitchforks.
Yeah, Zalrock, exactly. Communism with racism. The racist threads that run through this manifesto. Now, he's got a lot more articles I haven't read yet. I am guessing that there's just as much racism in them. I'm going to have to read so much Yarvin for the next episode. Oh my God.
I am so sorry.
Please help. Please say it. Why did I do this to myself?
I don't know. You're the one who chose this topic, babe. Like, not me. So I will suffer with you.
Thank you.
Misery loves company.
I am guessing that the racist threads throughout this are only amplified by Mr. Moldbug. And, we're going to see. So our next 2 episodes will be expanding upon the Yarvin verse. The Yarvin cinematic Moldbug verse. I don't know. We're going to come up with a name for it. I don't have it yet.
Jesus
It'll be
Christ.
something. Is this, people are going to say, they're going to watch these future episodes and they're like, is that canon in Yarnin verse? Or is this from like the expanded Yarvin verse? Because those things, I'm assuming they exist. I do not know. I'm going to make some predictions about Yarvin. I am not sure. I'm going to guess that there have been things that he has proposed or said that at some point he's had to throw away. And those things are going to be in like the expanded Yarvin verse, but they're not going to be canon Yarvin.
They're not going to be canon.
Right. They're not going to be Yarvin canon.
Yeah, Yannon.
Yannon Carvin. They're not going to be Yarvin canon.
We're
That's my
losing brain
guess.
cells here, Dom. Like, this is...
It does. Reading this makes you stupid. It's sad, but that's how it is. But the other thing is, somebody said on Blue Sky to me today, why are you giving air to a faux sophist? I'm not. I would love to fucking ignore Yarvin. Because I knew he existed and stuff.
You knew he was a
I'd seen his name or that he was talking at some place, or I'm like, oh yeah, that's that weird blogger. I'm giving him air because the people that are in charge of our lives right now listen to him.
And that's terrifying.
Right. It's not me. I haven't decided that Curtis Yarvin should be elevated, brought up. The New York Times just did a great interview with him, which we will talk about. I'm not sure if we're going to do that in episode 2 or episode 3. I think episode 2 is going to be like the evolution of Yarvin, and then episode 3 is going to be modern Yarvin. That's probably what we're going to do.
Okay.
So it'll probably be episode 3 where we bring that up. But it's not just me. I'm not the only person. I'm the only person I have seen so far who has wrote about the manifesto itself. I haven't seen that anywhere else. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write on it, because I was like, well, I'll do something that no one else is doing, and it's interesting at least.
And it's important to like get people's attention on this because, again, like this is the people that are making the decisions for us right now are considering this guy like smart. And
they're
his
guru.
ideas good.
Like they're his disciples. The other thing that you have to understand is that these guys aren't Christians. This is their dogma. Their dogma doesn't come from a Bible. No, it comes from Curtis Yarvin's writings. This is Elon Musk's scripture. Okay? Yeah, it's bonkers. It's just communism. It's Leninism, I guess. I don't know.
More racist Leninism.
Lenin was pretty...
I said more racist.
More racist, yeah. Yeah, it wasn't like Lenin was like, I have black friends.
Yeah.
But so that's why this is important to talk about, because this manifesto is the Bible of the alt-right.
And that's terrifying.
Of the tech bros, the tech fatalists. It's formalism is of geeks and for geeks, or whatever the fuck, by geeks, for geeks, whatever he said. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching, listening, whatever it is you did, whether you're watching us live or on the replay. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I never talk about liking and subscribing and sharing, but it really helps. And, I don't know if you know this or not, but at 10,000 subscribers, if we ever get there, I have to get a tattoo. I have to get a soy boy tattoo at 10,000 subscribers. I don't know if you guys know that or not. You don't act like you know that. But I literally have to get a tattoo, a soy boy tattoo at 10,000 subscribers. So
I will go with you. You come visit me and we'll go get tattoos together.
No, I will be getting a tattoo from my brother, who is a professional tattoo artist.
Enough. Then I'll come visit you.
You can come visit me, but my brother will do the soy boy tattoo. So, if you ever want to see me get a tattoo, well, I have no tattoo. I've never gotten a tattoo. I hate needles. It's literally terrifying for me to even visualize.
So bad. You've been out. I have several.
I know. I hate needles. It's why the only person I would allow to tattoo me would be my brother. The only person.
My most recent is this one here.
And by the way, check out my brother, Pat.Crump on Instagram. He's incredible. Absolutely incredible artist. Pat.Crump.
Well, I know what I'll be doing when I come visit.
Yes. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. We'll be back next week with part 2 of our Yarvin deep dive, into the Yarvin verse.
Why are you doing this to me?
Get excited!
Do you hate me, Dom?
Love you guys. Okay, goodbye.